Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior Podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease. I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute for medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started. Welcome back, friends. I am so ready to talk about something that's actually very difficult for me to express to a lot of people. And let's just do a quick recap. So we started off talking about IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome. Then we talked about how I took steps to understand what I could do to resolve my gut issues. Later, we talked about, okay, I have this. How am I going to take the steps to get better? So we walked through what was my 6-week process to really heal my gut. Now, with that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit more about something that can be very difficult for many of us, and that's our relationship with food. Now, I have had so many people say to me, well, you're skinny. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to worry about food. You don't need to worry about diet. You don't have to worry about exercise. And I kind of have to, actually. That's definitely an insult for me to hear. However, I didn't always have a healthy relationship with food. Now, when I was initially going through having all of the issues that I had with my thyroid disease. Now, when I was going through the motions of trying to understand what was happening to me, remember, I had lost a lot of weight very quickly because I started off being hyperthyroid initially. I had people ask me, so when are you going to eat? Do you want to go out? How are things going? I see that you exercise a lot. What's up with that? And there were so many people indirectly asking me if I had an eating disorder, which someone just flat out said it in one of my classes that I was in at the end. And she's like, so I'm sorry, but do you have an eating disorder or not? Like, you're really skinny, or, are you like trying out some new things? Like shrooms was a big thing at the time. And, it really baffled my mind as to A, why that was someone else's business to worry about whether or not I had an eating disorder or not. And B, if people are concerned, it's a very, very, now personally, if someone does in fact have an eating disorder, it's a very different thing to come to them from a point of care to figure out a way to address that situation. And it was very, very hard for me. I remember being very angry because I couldn't understand, well, what business is it of yours if I have an eating disorder or not? Or why are you asking me these questions? Why are you beating around the bush? Just ask. Or if you care about me, supposedly, why are you holding things from me? And it was a very confusing process. But the problem was that I slowly began to look at myself as someone who had issues with food. Now, it took a very long time for me to start to accept my body for what it was, because I had been bullied a lot as a child. And that took me back to a very dark time in my life where people were just mean and nasty. And I don't have a lot of patience for that. And that just put me in a deeper depression than what I already was. Now, Fortunately, I had been seeing the school counselor, so I was able to go and talk to her about what was going on with me. And naturally, she knew that I didn't have an eating disorder, but we were trying to figure out what was going on with my health from that perspective as well. I have extreme empathy for people that have eating disorders who suffer with a negative relationship with food. And I really want to make it very clear right now that regardless of the spectrum that you're on, whether you're overeating or undereating, it's a very difficult thing to deal with, which for me, it took me there. And I slowly felt myself starting to overeat. I saw the weight coming back, which was great, but then I swung to the other end of the spectrum. Now, a lot of people were like, oh, you look normal again, but I'm tall, so my weight won't distribute the same way as someone who's shorter than me. However, I knew that I started gaining weight a lot faster, but I was also running track and field in college, which saved me in a lot of instances because I could burn off the calories and such. But once I graduated and had to eventually stop running track, wasn't so generous then. Now, one of the things that I had to work on was looking myself in the face, in the mirror, and having more positive self-talk with myself. Now, I'm a very observant person, so I noticed that my pants were starting to fit a little bit more tight. My shirts were getting tighter. I could see the fullness in my face. And for a lot of people, again, I'm tall. They can't tell the differences too much, but I noticed and I felt uncomfortable. And about 15 pounds later, I didn't understand what was going on. Now, again, my weight gain and weight loss is very different from your weight gain and your weight loss, and what's normal for you might not be normal for me and vice versa. So I want to make it very clear that this is a no judgment zone. And regardless of whether you're gaining or losing, it's all very difficult. And I want us to be able to have a conversation around this because I noticed that it was very difficult for me to run and to do things, and my joints started to hurt more, and it was just a lot of things going on. Particularly, I started to get a lot more self-conscious than what I already was. So it was a domino effect because I was spiraling, but I didn't understand what was behind it. And that didn't come until I had a very honest conversation with my therapist, because I said, I'm starting to have a really hard time eating, and I don't quite understand what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to feel. I was doing really well in terms of my diet, but now I'm overeating and I'm feeling that comfort, but it's also a problem because I'm eating because it's a habit, not necessarily because I'm hungry and not necessarily because I need some type of sustenance. It was a chewing thing for me because that calmed me down. But I didn't realize that until I talked that out. Later, I started to really pay attention and ask myself, are you eating because you're hungry, or are you eating because you're bored? Those were two questions that I constantly had to ask myself. Are you eating because you're hungry, or are you eating because you're bored? Every day, every meal, I started to ask myself those questions. And just in those two questions, I slowly started to minimize that aimless or mindless snacking, which I noticed it on the scale. The other thing that was also very difficult was, again, going out and interacting with other people. And my friends and I like to eat. It's very common. It's very standard. It's just the thing to do. So I didn't always eat as healthy as I do now. But when I did start and go along this process of starting to clean up my diet, I started to get teased. I started to get those questions of, well, why do you need to eat arugula? And what is arugula anyway? And it's nasty. It's bitter. It's this, it's that. And, you constantly have people starting to question you and question your choices, which it, again, makes you question, why am I doing this? Which essentially pushed me over the edge again to say, well, why am I doing this? I quickly realized, however, that in order for me to be the best version of me, this was something that I had to do. Ultimately, those meals started to come few and far between, not because I didn't care about my friends, not because I didn't care about that fellowship and that community, but because I had bigger fish to fry, essentially. And there were goals that I wanted to achieve, and I had to disassociate that comfort almost, because I didn't want to fall into my old habits. Now, once I started to do this and once I became more mindful of what was going on, it became a lot easier for me to simply be and just enjoy what I was eating, enjoy what I was doing, and recognize that food is medicine. It's fuel. It's what makes me feel good. It's what makes me feel happy, but I don't have to overdo it. I eat until I'm full and I'm satisfied. Gone are the days where I just eat because I have a huge plate of food in front of me. Now, if I do that, I will physically get sick. However, it took me a long time to get here, and my advice to you would be to be patient with yourself. This is not something that is easy, especially if you're newly diagnosed. It'll take time, but you can do it. So I encourage you to take baby steps. And for me, what that meant was asking those two questions initially. Am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored? From there, I could say, all right, well, when I'm hungry, let me make sure that I have protein, that I have those healthy fats, and that I minimize the unhealthy carbs and sugar that I have, because that's just, no one else is going to take care of me when I don't feel well besides me. So I had to make some very hard decisions, and that meant losing friends, being judged by people that you love and that you think love you, but they don't understand. So I really found that out the hard way, is that not everyone is going to understand your journey and why you're doing what you're doing. Case in point, I have a very portioned way of preparing my meal. So I have all of my containers, and they're small meals, and I typically eat every 2 to 3 hours. So I'll have a small container. If I heat it up, people will say, well, that's all you're going to eat. Excuse me, mind your business. I did not ask you what you're eating. I'm not judging what you're eating. Let me live my life, please and thank you. Again, I have matured a lot, because there were times where I would literally just look at the person and blink and walk away. But I realize that is rude, and I cannot do that, especially at work. So, what I do is I explain, well, I eat every 2 to 3 hours. I have portion meals. I make sure that I'm eating a healthy amount of protein, healthy amount of fat, low carbs, and that's what works for me. And what I've realized and noticed is that people are like, wait a minute, can you tell me more about this? Like, is that why you're so skinny, or is that why you have so much energy? And honestly, I kind of look past that. I just focus on, okay, this person has a question. How can I be a good experience for them? Because if you've ever had someone mock what you're doing or give you a hard time, I didn't want to be that same person. I didn't want to just be biased and that person that was just bitter because everyone was constantly judging what I was eating. So rather than doing that, I took the time and I explained it to them. And I'm so happy I started doing that because I literally have people saying, wow, that smells good, instead of, what is that? Or, how did you make that? Do you have a recipe for that? Can I try it? And I will sometimes take an extra container of food so that if someone's curious enough and they want to try it, I am more than happy to share it with them, as long as it is not one of my main containers, because food is important and I get hungry. But, I have learned through my pain that a lot of people are also really afraid to speak up when they're having issues when it comes to food. And that's also something that I really would like to change one step at a time. So my challenge to you this week is, if you're that person that's having issues with food, especially if you're the type that just sits there and just eats and you're not quite sure why you're eating, ask yourself, am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored? The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to walk to the mirror and I want you to tell yourself that you are beautiful. So I want you to try that this week, my Thigh Warriors, and I hope that you are able to see your value and your worth. Food does not define you, nor do the negative thoughts, judgments, and opinions of others, because honestly, what other people think of you is none of your business. I encourage you to continuously work on you and work on those things that will continue to sustain you each and every day. Okay, Thyroid Warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, be great, reflect on your triumphs, and as always, be well. Take care.